They watched Earth like gods gazing upon ants. From their shimmering thrones aboard 1,000 orbital warships, the Carthary Dominion commanders sipped luminous nectar and spoke in bored tones about the futility of this campaign. It was, after all, Earth, that primitive planet on the galactic fringe. That loud, chaotic species who broadcasted ancient sitcoms and outdated war footage into deep space like a desperate cry for relevance. They were not seen as a threat. They were seen as entertaining. High Overlord Chathsoul reclined in his gravity-sculpted throne, eyes glowing faintly as he reviewed centuries of intercepted transmissions. They make music about rebellion, he sneered, and films where lone soldiers destroy entire fleets. This is how they cope with fantasy. The bridge crew chuckled, their oily laughter vibrating through the hull like a purr. Earth would fall in hours. Its leaders would kneel. Its people would be integrated or eliminated, depending on how well they adjusted to subjugation. The Dominion had done this 1,000 times across 1,000 star systems. Humanity would be no different. The Carthary were old, arrogant, and vast. Their empire stretched like a virus across spiral arms, its psionic conduits tapping into the minds of lesser beings before a single shot was fired. Resistance was rare. Surprise was non-existent. Earth, however, had proven frustratingly quiet. No diplomatic broadcast, no emergency defenses activated. Not even a declaration of surrender. It was, they assumed, cowardice or ignorance. No one noticed when Earth's orbital satellites blinked offline. Not destroyed, just powered down. One by one, their signals ceased without so much as a static ping. Alien scouts dismissed it as a system failure. No one noticed when thermal scans of major cities began returning false readings, entire neighborhoods appearing empty or non-functional. Surely a glitch, surely. Then came the first ripple. It started with the Harshtech scout vessel Luminous Pride, which was performing a standard approach maneuver over Earth's equator. It was a simple operation. Descend into low orbit, launch 12 drones, collect civilian patterns. The ship entered the atmosphere on schedule. It never exited. There was no explosion, no call for help. One moment the Luminous Pride was present on all instruments. The next it wasn't. Not a debris, not a transponder, not even a heat bloom. It simply ceased to exist. The Carthary command flagged it as an anomaly. Another crew chuckled. Human error, they joked. Hours passed. More ships entered the atmosphere. More disappeared. Then came the screams. From a fleet nearly 60,000 strong, spread across the skies of Earth, hundreds of captains began reporting strange occurrences, hallucinations of shadowy figures, instruments reading atmospheric densities. That made no sense. Communications jammed by old Earth language phrases. We're already here. We see you. Run. One commander, desperate for clarity, attempted a direct psionic scan of the human population centers. The instant his mind brushed Earth's mental frequencies, he collapsed, bleeding from every orifice. The last thing he gasped before convulsing into stillness was, "They're awake." Still, the High Council dismissed these incidents as statistical noise. It wasn't until the planetary control ship Dresth received a burst transmission from its own ground team, garbled, blood-slicked video of its soldiers being dragged into darkness by nothing, that something shifted. In the recording, there were no visible enemies, no weapons, no explosions. Just Carthary soldiers firing in all directions before being plucked away by unseen forces, their armor folding inward as if crushed by impossible pressure. And then, the silence. Earth was too quiet. Dominion protocol dictated immediate subjugation. Entire cities were to be leveled to provoke submission. As the command to launch was issued, something unexpected happened. All power died. Across the entire Carthary fleet in Earth's orbit, systems blacked out in an instant. Not exploded, not fried, deactivated. Every display went dark. Every engine stopped humming. The stars outflickered, then vanished. For a heartbeat, the entire Dominion armada hung dead in space like corpses adrift in black water. And in that silence, Earth spoke. Not with a voice, but with action. Across low orbit, massive shapes began to appear one by one, decloaking silently like waking titans. Sleek, angular ships unlike anything seen in the galactic archives. Not human in form, not alien, something new. Something terrifying. Dozens of them, hundreds, and they hadn't arrived. They had been there the whole time. Inside the Dominion command bridge, alarms finally sparked back to life. External sensors screamed as they picked up new contacts, impossibly close. The ship's captain, eyes wide, saw what none of them could believe. A human vessel, less than a kilometer away. No heat signature, no drive trail. No visible weapons. Just a single symbol glowing from its hull. A triangle with 3 dots. The same as the one found on a child's toy. The human ship transmitted a single message. You were warned. And then the Dominion fleet began to vanish. Rain fell over Earth's surface with deceptive calm. Alien dropships hovered above quiet cities, scanning for resistance. There was none. No gunfire, no scrambling civilians, no radio broadcasts. The humans had seemingly vanished, or perhaps they were too primitive to organize a response. Commander Jules Verne of the 13th Carthary Siege Legion narrowed his 6 eyes, watching as his troops fanned out through the abandoned remains of what Earth maps identified as Tokyo. The structures were intact, powerless, but untouched. Streets were eerily clean. Not a single body, not a single weapon. It was as if 10 million people had stood up at once and walked away. Status? He hissed into his neural array. All clear, Commander, his second-in-command replied. Still no human resistance detected. Infrastructure shows evidence of sudden evacuation. They must have fled into wilderness zones. Jules Verne frowned. They did not have the time or the means. In the distance, a squad passed under a dim streetlight. It flickered once and extinguished. A private glanced upward and saw a shadow move against the clouds. Just a trick of the light, surely. But the squad's heart rates spiked anyway. The clouds above them rumbled, not thunder, not a storm, but something colder. Like something huge, shifting just beyond sight. Meanwhile, across the ocean, another unit marched through what Dominion maps called New York. Their footsteps echoed through skyscraper canyons, guided by automated scanners. Every heat trace they found was either long dead or ... wrong. One building registered 42 human life signs, but when troops stormed the structure, it was empty. The bodies were gone. The warmth remained, fresh, recent. Troopers began complaining about phantom noises, breathing just behind them, footsteps that never matched theirs. One swore he heard his own voice whispering to him from the dark, "Leave." Another caught his reflection blinking out of sync. He fired wildly at nothing and vanished before his squad could reach him. His armor remained, crumpled like paper. In orbit, ships started vanishing again. Smaller ones, mostly. Patrol vessels, recon scouts. It was happening so fast now that commanders couldn't keep up. Entire formations disappeared mid-transit, all sensor data lost. Ships blinked out of existence with no alarm, no impact. Like something was reaching out and plucking them from the sky. Admiral Craystel of the Upper Fleet watched nervously as his vessels clustered closer together for protection. He knew, instinctively, that it was the wrong move, but his people feared isolation more than proximity. His cum officer spoke, voice tight. "Sir, I believe we are not alone. We have detected ... inconsistencies." "Explain," the Admiral barked. "There are gravitational distortions across multiple vectors, silent emissions. And I don't know how to phrase this, speak plainly." "Sir, the stars are moving." Silence fell on the bridge. Craystel turned to his viewport, watching the stars. They weren't, but his instincts whispered something ancient, something primal. That the stars were not stars at all. That something had been watching him for a long time, unmoving, just waiting for him to look back. He ordered a blind fire sweep across the distorted zone. They fired everything. Nothing hit. On the ground, Carthary siege teams began constructing planetary control pylons, attempting to stabilize their occupation despite the bizarre silence. Power nodes were deployed. Observation posts activated. Still no sign of resistance. It was maddening that every Carthary commander had been trained to handle uprisings, chaos, riots. But this silence was worse. The humans had not fled. The humans had not surrendered. The humans had simply disappeared. Then, across multiple outposts, anomalies occurred simultaneously. Weapons malfunctioned. Artificial gravity fields reversed. Carthary soldiers began convulsing, clutching at their heads, screaming. Some turned on each other, blindly attacking. Others shot themselves without warning. When backup arrived, they found walls painted in blood, but no sign of an enemy. In one base, a single soldier survived, huddled in a corner, repeating a phrase in a whisper. "They know our names. They know our names." Across all outposts, the same symbol appeared, carved into concrete, drawn in blood. Etched into walls, floors, windows. The triangle. 3 dots. Admiral Crazel reviewed the images with growing dread. What does it mean? He demanded of his intelligence chief. The chief was pale, her eyes wide. "It's human," she whispered. "It predates their space age." It was found on their oldest Black Ops files. Military records marked it Class Black, do not engage. Translate it. The room fell still. She hesitated, then replied, "Echo Protocol." No one knew what it meant. But the fear on her face was worse than the ignorance. A single ship in the outermost edge of the fleet, far from Earth's gravity, broadcast an emergency signal. It was distorted, static-filled, barely coherent. "This is survey vessel Ardent Skies. We saw it. We saw them. They're inside the void. They weren't hiding from us. They were waiting for the moment we blinked." Screaming followed, then silence. The High Council began to fracture. Some called for immediate withdrawal. Others demanded retaliation. But no one could find the enemy. There was no enemy. Only Earth, and something that now lived in the shadow of humanity. Something that was beginning to move. Asterisk. The first thing the Carthary noticed was how little they truly knew about Earth. For all their posturing, their millions of surveillance hours, their arrogant scans and intercepted transmissions, they'd never really looked. They had analyzed the noise of the humans, their broadcasts, their chaos, their constant bickering and entertainment, and assumed it told the whole story. But noise can be camouflage. And Earth had been whispering behind the noise for years. Turning point came not with a weapon, not with an attack, but with the absence of one. In orbit above what had once been known as the Mediterranean, the dreadnought Iskan's Wrath deployed its orbital terraforming cannon designed to eradicate planetary resistance in a single cleansing sweep. Its beam hummed to life, charging with the heat of a collapsing sun, aimed at a suspected underground hub beneath the ruins of old Athens. The cannon reached full charge. Then nothing. Power failed in mid-cycle. Not a flicker, not a malfunction. Energy simply vanished. 15 seconds later, the entire dreadnought broke apart from the inside. No explosion, no debris field. Just sudden, catastrophic disassembly. Its pieces fell through the clouds like rain. The Dominion screamed sabotage. They launched sensor sweeps, full-throttle EME bursts, and surface-probing scans that cracked Earth's crust in places. They found nothing. No launch trails. No heat blooms. No movement. Then someone had the idea to go back to cross-reference old Earth military data. Classified signals, encrypted black box feeds, digital ghosts. It was meant as a desperate archival Hail Mary. What they found changed everything. Hidden inside decommissioned radio bands, buried beneath layers of innocuous static, was a pulse, subtle, repeating, coordinated, the same pattern, the triangle, the 3 dots. A Carthery analyst noticed it first. That same formation had appeared hundreds of times over the last few decades, in satellite repair logs, in polar seismic readings, even in oceanic tide anomalies. It was always beneath notice, always dismissed. Until now. Until it was everywhere. And that's when the Echo protocol was fully decrypted. It wasn't a code. It was a network, a planetary defense system unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Not a wall, not a shield. A predatory system, self-contained, self-replicating, completely decentralized. It was biological. It was digital. It was human. It had been built underground, underwater, inside the crust, hidden beneath cities, disguised as infrastructure, data centers, train lines, plumbing, grids, abandoned silos, dispersed like blood vessels through the entire body of the planet. Every streetlight was a potential surveillance node. Every abandoned subway tunnel a kill chamber. Every transmission tower a sleeper weapon. Earth itself had been converted into a trap, and they had walked into its jaws. Suddenly, the disappearances made sense. The quiet wasn't weakness. It was preparation. And then, for the first time, they saw the soldiers. They did not arrive with fanfare. They did not speak. They did not move in ranks. They simply appeared, black silhouettes, no identifying marks. Their armor shimmered as if reality itself didn't want to focus on them. Faces obscured, limbs too fluid. Some described them as human. Others were not so sure. A Carthery sniper caught one in his scope, locked in. Fired. The round passed through empty space. Then he heard breath in his ear. His spine folded in half before he could scream. One by one, these soldiers emerged, not to attack, but to watch. They stood on rooftops, in alleys, just outside Dominion camps, always visible for just long enough to be noticed, always gone when approached, and every time they appeared, something vanished. A squad, a dropship, a commander, a voice on the wind, began to haunt the Carthery channels. Garbled at first, then clearer. Not human, not alien. Something in between. You called us myths. You watched our movies, laughed. You took our stories as weakness. We were never telling stories. We were warning you. Panic spread through the Dominion forces. Some tried to regroup. Others fired blindly into forests, buildings, the sky. Some began to mutter to themselves words like shadows, earthspawn. One officer tore off his command badge and screamed, "They're not soldiers. They're demons in skin." A small force attempted to leave orbit, break free of Earth's pull. Their ships ignited ... then turned inward, colliding at impossible angles, crumpling in midair as if gravity had been rewritten around them. Human forces never made demands, never sent envoys, never issued threats. They just watched and waited ... until finally they acted ... in the heart of what was once Africa. A Dominion command center detected a seismic anomaly. Within 30 seconds, the base was submerged under a new sinkhole half a kilometer wide. No tremors. No time to respond. The walls simply caved inward. The last transmission was the commander's voice whispering, "There's something under us." It was then the Carthery leadership accepted what none of them wanted to admit. They hadn't invaded Earth. They had awakened it, and Earth had teeth. Panic breeds mistakes. And the Carthery were beginning to panic. On the third day of occupation, they abandoned protocol entirely. Units no longer marched in formation. They clustered like frightened animals, scanning the shadows with wide eyes and twitching limbs. Commanders no longer issued orders from pride-soaked command thrones. They whispered into short-range links, too afraid to trust long-range channels. Fleet captains disabled AI interfaces, convinced they were being manipulated from within. And everywhere, across Earth's scarred surface, Dominion forces erected makeshift energy shields, not against missiles, not against aircraft, but against something they couldn't even describe. That it didn't help. The humans, or whatever these shadow-cloaked operatives were, had begun to escalate. Not with brute force, but with precision. With strategy so alien to the Carthri that it felt supernatural. In the mountain ranges of South America, a Dominion command center reported their perimeter alarms had been disabled. They sent out 6 scouts. None returned. Moments later, the base's lights failed. Generators detonated not outward, but inward, imploding with surgical pressure. Security footage showed nothing, just empty hallways. One by one, rooms went dark until only the command chamber remained. The last image transmitted showed a wall in the base's war room. Burned into it, precise, seared but not explosive, was the now familiar triangle with 3 dots. Then the base ceased to exist. Not destroyed, removed, replaced by a crater of polished glass, half a world away. Over Europe, Carthri Skygreeters Fortress-class carriers, the size of continents, held low orbit to deliver what should have been the final blow. Their heavy plasma arrays were aligned. Their targeting systems read clean. But when they fired, the beams arced sideways, literally sideways. Physics simply failed. Weapons designed to crack moons now bent into ribbons of harmless light, refracted across the upper atmosphere like aurorae. One of the gunners collapsed in his seat, eyes rolled back, muttering Earth names over and over again. Names he couldn't possibly know. Then came the silence. All of the dreadnoughts on board AI systems shut down simultaneously. Autonomous targeting, movement, even basic atmosphere control dead. In the space of a breath, the most powerful ships in the Dominion's fleet became lifeless hulks drifting over a planet that no longer respected their laws of reality. And in that silence, they heard them, from the surface one by one, the human stealth carriers began to decloak. They rose silently from oceans, from underground tunnels, from behind false mountains and disguised ice caps. Not hundreds, thousands, some shaped like jagged spears, others like ancient arrowheads, or shadows that shimmered like void metal. They didn't broadcast warnings. They didn't demand surrender. They waited. A Carthri captain screamed for evasive maneuvers. But the ship wouldn't move, not broken, not blocked. Held. As if Earth itself had reached up and wrapped its fingers around their hull. In a final act of desperation, the Dominion High Council ordered the deployment of the Cradleburn. These were elite biotechnological warforms, organic engines of destruction grown in the deepest vaults of Carthri Prime, used only in the most dire wars. Towering things of living armor, each bonded to a psionic core so powerful it could fracture steel with thought alone. 6 Cradleburn dropped into Earth's crust, their descent leaving glowing scars in the sky. They landed, they activated, and then they screamed. One by one, their minds fractured. Not from attack, from contact. Whatever they touched beneath Earth's surface, it touched back. A psionic feedback loop erupted across the Dominion fleet. Thousands of Carthri telepaths seized mid-thought. Ships veered off course, engines overloaded. Tactical maps filled with unintelligible glyphs. Some translated into fragments. We were never asleep. You are inside the kill box. This planet is not yours to bury. And then, a new horror. Earth's orbital pattern shifted, not visibly, not by gravity, by presence. A phenomenon long dismissed by the Dominion. Spatial intent fields, primitive nonsense to them, flared to life. Earth wasn't just a planet anymore. It was aware. The command to retreat came too late. In the Himalayas, an entire Carthri weapons forge was swallowed by what observers called a second shadow, a blackness not cast by light, but by will. In Africa, the sky opened not with thunder, but with absolute silence, and drew a Dominion airfleet into a cold, soundless void. Ships fell, not shattered, but erased, and still no human soldiers appeared in full. Only glimmers in the wreckage of a ruined Dominion base. A single survivor limped through ash and twisted metal. A figure stood at the edge of the fire, backlit by flickering flame. Humanoid. Silent. The Carthery crawled toward it, pleading in half-screamed words. The figure knelt, removed its mask. It was human. Ordinary. Eyes black as midnight. You came here laughing, the human whispered, behind them. In the smoke, more shapes emerged. Dozens, hundreds. The human smiled. You'll leave screaming. But the Carthery already knew they would not be leaving at all. Asterisk. The Dominion believed they had seen the worst. They had watched their dreadnoughts turned into scrap by invisible forces. They had seen their greatest weapons malfunction under a sky that no longer obeyed their physics. Their elite warforms, the Cradleburn, had fallen not in battle, but from madness, broken by whispers from the ground beneath their feet. Earth had become a place of shadows and unreason, and still they clung to the belief that they could win if only they adapted. So they tried. The Dominion High Council ordered a fleet-wide recalibration of weaponry. Every ship, every soldier, every drone was stripped of standard Dominion tech. They switched to analog backups. They hardwired old battlefield protocols. No automation, no psionics, no smart systems. Human interference, they reasoned, had to be digital in nature. A sophisticated AI or signal warfare suite, perhaps even a native planetary intelligence. Nothing they couldn't isolate and destroy. But Earth had never been fighting them digitally. It was fighting them psychologically, and that's what broke first. The signs came slowly at first. In one battalion, the soldiers began reporting shared dreams identical in detail. They dreamed of a hallway made of bone, stretching forever. At its end, a mirror. When they looked into it, they saw Earth staring back, not the planet, but a vast watching eye. In another fleet, engineers began experiencing what Dominion psychologists called memory bleed. They began remembering things that had never happened to them, human memories, standing in ruined cities, running through forests, holding weapons they'd never touched, speaking Earth languages fluently, despite no formal exposure. A technician whispered to himself in Latin before severing his own fingers and stating calmly, I wasn't born to conquer. I was born to resist. Then came the artifact. A Carthery excavation team operating in what had been Antarctica unearthed something massive. Not a building. Not a weapon. A vault. It had no doors, no visible seams. Its surface was perfectly smooth, yet rippled when touched as if made of frozen smoke. Readings failed. No matter the instrument, it returned nonsense. Some readings even returned future timestamps. They attempted to breach it with plasma drills. The drills vanished. No heat, no explosion, just ... gone. The leading scientist attempted to touch it directly. He smiled for a moment, then turned to ash. Inside Dominion High Command, the footage was analyzed again and again, frame by frame. And in the instant before he disintegrated, his eyes changed. They became human. That was when the theory emerged, whispered first by fringe officers and soon spoken aloud in the highest chambers. This was not a war against humans. This was a war against what humanity had become. And what humanity had become wasn't limited to humans anymore. Some believed it had been seeded across the stars, ideas, symbols, stories, a mimetic virus. Others believed Earth had merged with something older, something that had been waiting beneath its crust, perhaps before even humans evolved. Something that had chosen them, but it didn't matter. Because the second twist arrived with no fanfare. No assault. Just a transmission. Across every Dominion channel, across every fleet, In every language, every code one message. We are not alone. And then the sky turned red, not metaphorically. Literally, across Earth's atmosphere, a veil descended, light bent, colors shifted, and everything was washed in crimson. From deep space, new signals erupted. Thousands of them, non-human, non-dominion. Ships emerged from fold space, not human-built, but unmistakably allied. Ships long thought lost. Designs matching vanished races and extinct civilizations. Ancient, forbidden hull shapes. Fractal geometries only hinted at in pre-Dominion ruins. They were not human. But they bore the triangle with 3 dots. One by one, they decloaked around Earth, around Jupiter, around Mars. The entire Sol system had become an armed fortress, a nest not of one species, but of many, bound not by biology or empire, but by an idea. We do not kneel. Humanity, it turned out, had not fought alone. Not for centuries, long ago, Earth had become a myth in the shadows, its war stories, its sheer absurd resilience, spreading through back channels of the oppressed and broken across the galaxy. Other species had listened, had learned. And when the time came, they hadn't resisted the Dominion through diplomacy or rebellion. They had joined the Echo Protocol. The Carthari hadn't invaded a planet. They had invaded a resistance engine. One that had been learning, adapting, growing in silence. Preparing for the moment. The Dominion would be arrogant enough to try what none before had dared. And now the Dominion stood face to face not with humans, but with an entire coalition of the forgotten aliens who had once been enslaved. Civilizations presumed extinct. AI who had gone rogue, not for domination, but to protect. All united under one simple mantra. They don't see us until it's too late. On board the Dominion flagship, High Overlord Chathzo watched as his sensors turned to chaos. Every screen blinked symbols he couldn't translate. Every ship in his formation was marked by something: tags, glyphs, sigils. He turned to his warseer and asked, "What is this?" The seer stared in horror. "It's a death hymn. A battle dirge encoded in light. A warning. To us? No." The seer whispered. "To others. So they never make our mistake." The fleet began to fracture. Captains tried to flee. Warp drives imploded. Fold space turned toxic. The humans hadn't won yet. But the war was over. The Carthari just hadn't realized it. Not until that final signal appeared across every Dominion ship. Human language. Yes, but rewritten in their own script. You triggered a war that can never be undone. We are the children of Earth, and we never stopped hiding. We let you in, and now we will never let you leave. Asterisk. It began with a single shot, not a laser, not a missile, a single pulse from the atmosphere, a burst of sound and pressure that silenced space itself. The Carthari flagship, Vulkthaler, last of the Dominion's core command ships, shuddered in its orbit. Its shields collapsed without being touched. Its antimatter engines stalled mid-spin. One by one, its systems began failing, not from sabotage or attack, but from submission. As if the ship itself understood what was coming and refused to resist. Inside, High Overlord Chathzo watched in silence as the forward viewport filled with light. Not weaponized light. Motion. Thousands of vessels, decloaked, human-built, alien-forged, AI-grown. Ships of impossible design. Some glittered like obsidian. Insects. Others folded in on themselves like multidimensional origami. All bore the same symbol, etched in fire across their hulls. The triangle and 3 dots. They didn't move with urgency. They drifted into position with purpose. Earth wasn't launching a counterattack. It was conducting an execution. Then, bombardment began, not from orbit. From everywhere. From under oceans, from beneath the moons, from asteroids that had never been asteroids, from cloaked satellites older than the current century. Every particle beam, kinetic slug, graviton torpedo and singularity lance struck at once, coordinated with perfect sync tearing through Dominion hulls like paper. There were no warning shots, no speeches, no mercy. The Carthery ships returned. Fire in a panic, but their weapons never landed. Missiles bent mid-flight. Lasers refracted into space. Entire targeting arrays failed to lock onto enemies that no longer obeyed physics. In the Pacific, the sea cracked open like a wound. From the deep, rising as if called by an ancient oath, a titanic human construct surfaced kilometers tall, bristling with vertical launch silos and spinal railguns. A mobile fortress long since buried and forgotten. It opened its eyes, yes. Eyes glowing with artificial sentience, and spoke only one word: confirmed. It fired once, a pulse, low and resonant, that echoed across space like the ringing of a funeral bell. 3 Dominion carriers imploded on impact, reduced not to debris but to conceptual erasure. Their mass and data erased as if they had never existed. Across Earth's orbit, human stealth teams, those phantoms of war, were already aboard Dominion vessels. They moved in squads of 5, gliding through halls like ghosts. The Carthery never saw them. Only the aftermath control centers flooded with nanite mist. Engines sabotaged from within. Officers executed with a single silent shot between their thoughts. The humans didn't just kill, they demonstrated. One boarding party reached the Dominion's neural core storage vessel. Instead of disabling it, they hacked its network and fed it a memory loop footage from the initial invasion, replayed through every screen aboard the Dominion fleet. Only now, each shot ended differently. Where once a Dominion soldier marched unchallenged, now they were hunted. Where once Earth had been empty, now it watched. Where once the Carthery laughed, now they screamed. And still, the humans didn't speak. It was the silence that broke the Dominion. In every battle the Carthery had ever fought, there had been shouting, commands, screaming enemies, dying pleas. War was noise, but the Echo Protocol? It was pure silence, absolute. Unbending. The battlefield became still, no explosions, no cries. Just the hum of Earth's defense grid, the beat of synchronized death. Above Mars, a new formation arrived, ships shaped like ancient swords and great celestial beasts. The Martian exiles, thought long dead, had returned, humans bred in exile. In higher gravity, in silence and red dust. Their fleet carried no banners, no colors. Only scars and vengeance. They struck the Dominion rear line, cutting a path of destruction so precise that even the Carthery couldn't find anything to analyze. The ships weren't destroyed, they were deleted. As if space itself had chosen to unmake them. Then came the final signal sent by Earth's quantum core, routed through Nix. The once rogue AI now merged with the consciousness of 1,000 fallen human tacticians. The signal pulsed across every Dominion ship. 3 notes. Simple, melodic, lullaby. No words, just the sound of Earth remembering. And then, total collapse. Carthery. Morale broke like glass. Captains ordered their ships to flee, only to find their warp gates sealed, not by force, but by denial. Space refused their passage. Time turned thick around them. Some tried to self-destruct. Their systems replied with access denied. Earth had taken control of their minds, their weapons, their futures. Those who resisted were swept away by orbital kinetic rods, ancient technology, perfected through gravity wells. No explosions, just sudden craters. Sudden absences. By the end of the day, half the Dominion fleet was gone. By the end of the second, only wreckage remained. On the third day, Earth fell silent again. Not a boast, not a message, just silence. Chaffsaw, alone now, standing in the wreck of his command bridge, finally understood that it hadn't been a war. It had been a lesson, and humanity had not just taught it, they had authored it. He collapsed to his knees, trembling as Earth hovered in his view, bright and untouched. They were never prey, he whispered to himself, staring at that blue and white sphere. They were waiting for the predator. And now the predator was dead. The war was over, not declared, not ended by treaty or surrender, but concluded in the only way such a war could, with one side obliterated, and the other simply standing in the silence that followed. What was left of the Carthary fleet drifted. In low orbit, gutted and powerless, their mighty warships nothing more than hollow metal coffins. Shattered hulls floated in the quiet, caught in Earth's gravity, casting long shadows across the oceans below. Fires no longer burned, explosions no longer tore the sky. Even the whispers of the Echo Protocol had faded, and in that quiet, something new began to take shape. On the Dominion homeworld, billions of light years away, the High Council chamber was empty. The thrones once pulsing with psionic light sat cold and lifeless. News of the fleet's destruction had arrived not through messengers, but through the absence of them. Entire star lanes fell silent, relay stations refused to respond. It was as if a piece of the galaxy had gone dark, swallowed not by a black hole, but by a force with no name. And yet, in one deep vault beneath the Capitol, a recording played on a loop. It wasn't KHARTARI- made. It was human. A video clip, grainy, flickering, but unmistakable. A figure standing before a scorched Carthary flag, face hidden by a featureless mask. Behind them, the now ubiquitous triangle and 3 dots burned red across a black banner. The voice was clear. You saw Earth as primitive, loud, disorganized. You mistook our chaos for weakness, our stories for fantasy, our noise for distraction. You laughed at our movies, mocked our wars, thought we were alone. The figure leaned forward. We weren't. The screen cut to black. Across dozens of fringe colonies, rebel factions once hunted by the Dominion began to rise. Ships once thought lost returned from exile. Hidden vaults opened, revealing caches of weapons, technology, and knowledge, all bearing the same mark. They had been waiting, held in stasis, pre-positioned by a force that had seen far beyond the present. The Echo Protocol wasn't just Earth's last line of defense. It had become a seed. Every world that had suffered under the Dominion's rule now bore traces of it. Forgotten bunkers in the sands of Narration 3, data shards buried in the magnetic poles of Luraxis, AI fragments hidden in the static of old Dominion broadcast bands, each message the same. We are here. You are not alone. Let them come. But Earth remained still. Its orbit had returned to normal. The red hue in the sky faded to the soft blue it had always known. Clouds passed. Waves rolled. Cities, once abandoned, began to stir, and humans emerged not as victors, not as conquerors, but as witnesses to what they had done. Children stepped into streets that had once glowed with alien fire. Engineers walked beneath satellites that had silently ended a war. Soldiers removed their masks and knelt to plant crops beside the ruins. They did not celebrate because Earth remembered. It remembered every scar, every lost ship, every ancient invasion from before the galaxy knew its name. It remembered the centuries it had spent being mocked, ignored, underestimated. It remembered the ones who had fallen before the Echo Protocol was born. The men and women who whispered warnings into the void, praying anyone would listen. And now the galaxy listened. They came from far-flung corners, ambassadors from species once enslaved, emissaries of old allies who had fought in secret. They stood before Earth's new council not to negotiate, but to thank them, not for survival, but for the reminder that resistance, no matter how quiet, can shake empires, that hiding is not the same as weakness, that a species that tells stories of impossible victories is preparing for a day when those victories become real. And Earth, in its quiet way, began to teach. It opened its archives, not just weapons, but philosophies, strategies, warnings, parables dressed as old war films, fiction re-examined as doctrine, Stories once dismissed as childish, now revealed to be layered training for a war no one had expected, but Earth had always prepared for. And offered no domination. Only solidarity. Across the stars, small rebellions became revolutions. The Dominion. Fractured not from battle, but from fear, officers deserted. Colonies declared independence. Generals began whispering about nightmares they couldn't wake from, dreams of human eyes watching from behind familiar faces, of shadows that never moved, of voices whispering, "You don't get to forget." Some say Earth has built a new fleet, not to conquer, but to guard the galaxy's outer reaches. Others believe the Echo Protocol has moved beyond Earth, spreading into space like a sentient idea. But one thing is certain, the laughter has stopped. Now, when children on distant worlds ask about Earth, they are not told of a weak and noisy species. They are told a legend of a planet that slept with one eye open, that cloaked its army in myths, that waited, silent and patient, for the moment its enemies thought it safe to strike. And when that moment came, humanity uncloaked, and nothing was ever the same again.